The Republic was founded on the principles of democracy and freedom. It was a beacon of hope for hundreds of planets within a galaxy with a long history of war, slavery, and warlord conquest. However, despite its great support, the Young Republic from its beginning wasn't free of enemies. Some powerful groups were irritated by the democratic government of the Republic and the possible consequences that their criminal activities could have against the new doctrine. Despite great technological advances, many wars weren't fully informed about the Republic. The information trying to be as fast and accurate as possible, but reaching every corner of the galaxy was a complicated task. The information in various places was vague. The Republic became a collection of civilizations. When they looked toward a galactic rim, young core worlds such as Corellia, Duro, Alsakan, Axum, and Brental thought not on common goals, but of their own ambitions. Galactic exploration advanced rapidly, as the brave hyperspace explorers pursued rumors of strange ships deep in the galactic arms. At first, it was traders, not warriors, who fueled the galactic expansion, exchanging navigation information and discovering that the stars were teeming with new civilizations as well as wars ripe for colonization. The expansion advanced slowly and steadily towards the outer part of the galaxy. Brave traders made their fortunes in the rim and were able to find a beacon network that extended to various planets. While conflicts between settlers and traders from different worlds were not unknown, wars were something unusual and died quickly. The galaxy was too big to waste time on pointless conflicts. But beyond the rim, the Young Republic encountered two powerful civilizations. Within the Tion cluster, a society greatly reduced from that splendor that was once Zim's government. The Tionese had fractured into a collection of feuding states, but a common culture and Zim's beacon network united their worlds, which longed to regain their lost glories. And the Hutts, old enemies of the Tionese, those enormous worms that live in the center of a network of lush planets cared for by the slave species. Both the Tionese and the Hutts considered the young, rich worlds of the core to be great spoils from exploitation. Explorers from the Republic were able to have the first contact with the Tionese. Hundreds of years later, two completely estranged societies were reunited. Over the years, the colonists of the core wars had constant contact with their cousins, the Tionese. After all, both descended from the same lineage of humans that in the past, their hunger for research and adventure led them to exploration. After the Republic's first contact with the Tionese, the Hutts had concerns about a possible alliance between them. The Hutts knew of the danger of the Tionese. They had experienced the exploits of Zim the Despot, and being of the same species, a possible alliance seems logical to the Hutts. The Hutts' thinking differed from that of humans. It was stated that they felt threatened on a subliminal level. This fear meant that the Hutts tended to be paranoid. In addition, the Hutts have great intelligence, selfishness, and manipulative behavior. The innate behavior of the Hutts towards the search for territorial expansion in the limits of their domain was evident. His appetite for power was as insatiable as his appetite for food. Most Hutts were vicious megalomaniacs who considered their kind above the perceived morality of lesser beings. The war against Zim with the Tionese was an event that left its mark on the history of the Hutts, and they knew that they couldn't make the same mistakes of belittling their galactic neighbor. On the other hand, the pride and arrogance of the Tionese was very great. The contact between the ships of the Republic and the Tionese was indeed true. However, the Tionese for some reason had the perception of a young republic with lack of experience, devoid of military power, and from the Severo, the capital. The goal was clear, a rich but weak target, ready for conquest and with planets rich in resources. The Tionese aristocrats persuaded the rest of the states in the region to form a loose confederation with the goal of conquering the Republic. The Tion states wanted the core superior hyperspace technology and wealth for themselves, and the new space hyperroutes were an ideal invasion corridor. So, Initially, trading guilds and exploration companies, some became military organizations, at first under the auspices of their homeworlds, but eventually under more centralized control. The conflict between the Republic and the Honorable Union of the Sever and Tion led to the Tionese War, which broke out around this time. The bravery and recklessness of Zim the Despot ran in the blood of the Tionese. The old glories were visible glimpses in war. The Tionese fought with an impetus little seen by the Republic. The Kirin Reaches is a sector within the Outer Rim territories located south of what was once the Empire of Zim the Despot. Its importance lies in its location. It's the dividing wall between the Tion cluster and the Hutt space. Years ago, the first contact between Zim and the Tionese with the Hutts was in that location, when Zim's explorers had contact with the Hutt slaves. At one point between the Zim Wars, the Kirin Reaches were fortified and the hyperspace beacon network expanded to create a hyperlane, the Warrior Straits, to the edges of Hutt space. After Zim's death, the Hutts proclaimed themselves sole owners of that sector of space. They continued to exploit the region of the galaxy in search for more slaves to trade with and even use them for their own benefit. The Hutts, seeing the war between the Tionese and the Republic and knowing the relationship of descent they shared, led them to believe that they were witnessing something familiar, a clan war. If so, the defeated clan will agree to serve the victors, uniting these humans against their other potential enemies. The Hutts, remembering ghosts from the past, act ruthlessly to create a buffer between themselves and the Tion cluster. The Hutts' characteristic paranoia, mixed with the history of warfare with the Tionese, coupled with the Republic's contact with the Tion cluster, and the little reliable information the Hutts had about those meetings, made a perfect combination for the Hutts' master plan. The Devouring, a devastating campaign of genocide against the Tionese. Within the Kirin Reaches, the Hutts attacked the worlds and wiped out every last man, woman, and child they found. The Hutts destroyed the colonies, erasing their history. Also, they destroyed the hyperspace beacons Zim had built, leaving the Kirin Reaches completely depopulated and reduced to barren and radioactive worlds with very few hyperlanes in the region. Over time, they became known as the Ash Worlds. The Tionese claimed that their group was the cradle of humanity and were proud of Zim's achievements. The Tionese greeted the arrival of the Republic's merchants with a combination of jealousy and wild hope. While the Tionese technology had remained stagnant since the era of Zim, Republic shipbuilders have improved Corellia and Duro's creation of Rakata technology. During the war, Republic ships were faster, more reliable, and could travel farther than anything else in the Tion cluster. But at the same time, the Tionese saw an opportunity. No travel between the Tionese worlds were particularly safe, and Tionese ships bristled with plasma cannons and torpedo mounts. The elegant spaceships of the Republic merchants were lightly armed. The Tionese began researching and capturing Republic technologies and building war fleets. The Tionese warships encountered little resistance. Adhian, the farthest Republican world, fell to the raiders. Then, world after world was lost and the Tionese gained new ships with each victory. Belatedly aware of its danger, the Republic embarked on an intensive program of warship production, but it was too late. Large numbers of Tionese invaders swept through hyperroutes, backed by larger warships. The Republic shipyards were destroyed by the Tionese's new weapons, pressure bombs, powerful meteor explosions whose heat storms and shockwaves leveled cities. Increasingly, the Tionese were advancing towards the heart of the Republic. They dropped pressure bombs on every Republic world. The Tionese's relentless attacks on the Republic were not only limited to key military locations. The violence was even directed at the inhabitants of innocent planets. Entire cities were erased from existence. Fathers, mothers, and children had to see how their relatives were exterminated without any mercy. One of the planets that was victim of the Tionese bombing was Okator 8, and thanks to the testimony of a survivor, we can have a glimpse of the horror and indifference of the Chinese. I grew up in Little Atulus, but my parents brought me to Okator 8 when I was a boy. They sunk their life savings into land promised by some hotshot traders out of Brento. There was a lot of that in Little Atulus then, talk that a very life awaited you on the unspoiled worlds beyond the rim. And it was kind of true. Okator 8 wasn't lush. It was chilly and the soil was poor, but land was cheap. The soil could be improved with effort, and the native willies were gently beasts that took easily to domestication. That was my first job, while my parents built the cabin and cleared the fields. Go into the woods and put out willy bait. I got sick the first day and thought I was the god of the forest. Then I named them all. My parents hadn't told me that the willies were destined for the dinner table. I was lonely at first, but eventually I forgot about Little Atulus, except in my dreams, and I got used to farm life. Then I realized I was happy, that I knew each of our willies by the smell of his coat and the way he'd wicker. I knew every tree in our woods, every outcropping in the hills, every deep and reach. We knew about the war, of course. We'd heard the latest when we went into town or got a good signal on the subspace box. I knew about the Tionese, that they'd done awful things to us and maybe we'd done awful things to them. I'd heard of Zim. He'd been eaten by the devil's luck so they could gain his powers, but the Tionese claimed he would return from death to leave them. But he'd been dead forever with no signs of coming back. And all of it was such a long way from Okator that I didn't see how it mattered to us. Sometimes the beacon at Uthara would break down and you wouldn't see a trade ship for weeks until it got fixed. I heard that's why they chose us. I heard that they were tired of killing a few blocks worth of people on some city world so big that their deaths were just a statistic. I heard they looked for a place where they could kill everybody. I don't know how they picked Okator. It doesn't really matter. It could have been a lot of places in the divide. They could have picked other one, but they didn't. They picked Okator. I was out in the forest with my wally when I heard the first ship. I knew it wasn't one of the trade ships or a courier in a business. The drive sounded different. It had this weird, deep grumble to it. I didn't see that one, but I saw the next one, and the third. They were copper-colored, with red sigils on the conning towers, and I knew it was them. They came in their Tion jacks. The next thing I knew, I was on my back and I couldn't hear. I got up and saw the trees had been flattened, pointed away from their white township. There was a pile of black smoke beyond the ridge, and then the smoke washed over the ridgeline and hit everything. My wally was racing around me, and I could see him showing his teeth and howling, even though I could barely hear it. Then my wally stopped and the spine of his back raised up. He stood stock still for a moment, and then went streaking off through the trees toward home. And I saw the glint of the tiny ships, moving slowly, like they were looking for something. I saw the flashes of the bombs and the flares, beneath the jack's bright valleys. I saw the gas billow bob above Donny, and knew that everyone there was dead. Then the flames came shooting up from Shilag. And then I started to run, because now there was another gleam above the ridge, above my valley. The worst thing, I think, is that I saw the form before the jack began its attack run. My wally had rounded up the other wallies and brought them home. He had been taught that danger was out in the woods, and the farm meant safety. He didn't know that now the opposite was true. The jack ignited its plasma torch, and I saw my wally and the other ones running in circles. They were on fire. All I wanted was for them to be still, for it to be over. It took so long. And then the house was burning, and the fields, and everything. I saw each of the pictures pop as its nectar boiled, and then the jacks were gone. Their work done. It was 3 weeks before the courier came and found everything destroyed by the bombs. Another 2 before I was able to hail the scout ship. That was the last time I saw Okator. As far as I know, it was the last time anyone saw Okator. They wanted me to go to Cursant to tell my story, but I refused. Instead, I went to enlist and eventually they let me. 4 months later, before I could get into the fight, the Severos surrendered. The war was over. And now, I've been here for 12 years, a Republic Guardsman serving the Jedi Watchman. I monitor ship traffic, intelligence, transmissions, everything that comes out of the Tion. I don't like here. It's cold and it rains all the time. There isn't anything that will grow or any beast to tend. And I don't like what I do. It gives me too much time to think. But somebody has to do it, and I am that somebody. I didn't choose it. It was chosen for me when the Jacks came to Okator. I don't hate the Tionese anymore. I used to. It made me feel sick all the time. So I made myself stop. But I didn't trust them. No one in the Republic should ever trust them. They need to be watched. And my job is to watch them. All of us here watch them. And we always will. A desperate counterattack by ships drawn from numerous core systems finally repulsed the Tionese. Far from the invasion route, the shipyards of the Republic began producing warships, and the Republic resumed the fight, establishing a series of offensives and counteroffensives that will span the entire territory for almost a century. The Republic worlds became armed camps, and the inhabitants of the core worlds lived in fear of the tiny suicide ships. Elsewhere, Republic agents, many of whom were well-connected merchants, incited the Hutts against their former rivals, forcing the Tionese to protect their outlying possessions against raiders and pirates. Finally, after an internal debate, the Jedi entered the war as Republic commanders, worried that the galaxy will descend into barbarism without their intervention. The Tionese War effort had been doomed as soon as several key Republic worlds put their industrial power behind their military buildup. Between the Hutts and the most advanced technology of the Republic, Tion leaders felt their culture face extinction. And so, the Tionese fought on, subjecting the worlds and citizens of the Republic to a constant pace of sneak attacks, raids, and terrorist acts. This also radicalized the Republic, and a strategy of total war was adopted. The Republic stormed into Tion territory, with pressure bombs devastating Kadint, Jaminer, Thanium, Shandar, and Varsek. The Sever was the last to fall, absorbing gruesome punishment before finally offering his unconditional surrender. It was rejected. The Republic's military leaders had decided to sterilize the Sever as an object lesson for the rest of the Tionese. After this event, the Jedi didn't agree with the actions taken against the Tionese. The Order had joined the war to prevent civilization from descending into barbarism, but barbarism was winning anyway, and now the Jedi were part of it. After tense meetings of the devastated and exhausted Sephiroth, the Jedi agreed to serve as vigilantes ensuring the security of the Republic. The assault on the Republic turned out to be Tion's last gasp as galactic power. Within centuries, it was part of the Republic, and no more problematic came from that sector of the galaxy. Finally, The Jedi had chosen to play a formal role in the defense of the Republic. Their decision will be the subject of debate and discussion for centuries to come. However, they knew of the various dangers that the galaxy had, and their ideology of protecting the defenseless was something they could not let pass.